Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to the International Women's Day special webinar hosted by PsychSpace. Today, we are diving into the important topic of understanding generational trauma, breaking the cycles, building futures. As we celebrate Women's Day, we come together not only to honor the achievements and resilience of women around the world, but also to engage in critical conversations about the challenges women face, often across generations. One of the most profound yet sometimes invisible challenges is generational trauma. Today, we'll explore what generational trauma truly means, how it impacts women across generation, and most importantly, how we can begin to heal. This webinar features experts and thought leaders who will help us understand this complex topic, share stories, and offer insights into healing practices and coping strategies. Joining us this afternoon are esteemed professionals who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in the field of mental health. So allow me to introduce our distinguished speakers for today. Firstly, we have Ms. Yeaija Choudhury. Ms. Yeaija Choudhury, who has been a mental health enthusiast since a very young age, is known for being very vocal about her journey with body image issues as a storyteller in a Spotify original podcast, Dear Teenage Me, and various social media platforms. Ms. Yeaija completed her master's in clinical psychology from Christ University and is currently working as a psychologist at PsychSpace. We welcome you. Then secondly, we have Ms. Sonakshi Bhargava with an MSc in clinical psychology from Christ University and currently pursuing her PhD as a junior research fellow, is a professional Bharatanatyam dancer with the title of Kalashri. She runs her own private practice both online and offline based out of Basant Kuch in New Delhi and a mental health page called Mental Health with Sonakshi on Instagram on wellness, well-being and self-love. She has taken sessions at channels such as UGC Live, TV, News X, etc. Last but not the least, we have Ms. Ritika Agarwal, a silver medalist with BA MSc in Counseling Psychology, received 100% scholarship during her academic journey and was on the Dean's list for the year 2021. She was engaged as an educator and syllabus curator at Royal Global University for the academic year 2023 and 2024. She is a psychologist and advisor at Arena Animations and a counselor and PGT at Springdale International Schools. We welcome you both, ma'am. And I'm Tessa Berman, your moderator for today's webinar. I'm a trainee neuropsychologist currently pursuing my PG neuropsychology at Jain University. I have authored nearly 5 research articles in national journals and currently interning at NIMHANS Bangalore. A very warm welcome to all our speakers, and thank you so much for dedicating your valuable time to be with us today. So now, without further ado, let's delve into our topic. So, firstly, I would like to ask this question to everyone. Yeah, I would like to begin with Ritika ma'am. So, as we're talking about generational trauma, would you like to tell our audience that what is generational trauma and how does it differ from personal trauma?
First of all, thank you, Desu, for the wonderful welcome. And also, I welcome the co speakers today, Sonakshi and Yeaija. Happy International Women's Day. And also, I would like to pass my gratitude and thank to PsychSpace for giving us this wonderful platform today and to speak in such a serious issue. And yeah, so before any, am I audible? Yeah. So yeah, generational trauma, which is also known as intergenerational trauma, it's something. If you ask me in a later mean, it's something the person is not consciously living with. It's basically they are having the impact of someone who has lived the moment or the experiences. It's just the impact of the traumatic events a person has met. For example, if a person had issues with parenting in his or her time, like say emotional neglect or abuse or something, they might face a problem to make a secure attachment with their future generation. And this generational trauma not just impact the person mentally or say impacting their behavior or emotional development, but they do also have physical concerns related to generation to generation. Personal trauma, on the other hand, is something the people or the person has lived the moment. Is their personal experiences regarding any accident or, say, suppose loss or any other traumatic event. What makes the key difference between generational trauma and personal trauma is the experiences of the person. So, in personal trauma, it is direct, and generational trauma, it's indirect. But yeah, healing requires both understanding the individual and, of course, the collective wounds which is shaping the life. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'd like to ask Sonakshi, ma'am, the same question. What is generational trauma and how does it differ from personal trauma?
Yeah, so I think, firstly, I think Miss Radhika put it out very well, and she's explained most of what it means. So I think personal trauma is what an individual faces in their own lifetime, the experiences they have, and whether it could be small traumas or big traumas, it's what's through their own learned experience. But generational is when it is biologically or psychologically passed through ages, right? So we know how biological trauma can affect the brain and gene changes. Like, for example, let's say if there is something which is generationally traumatic for certain 3 to 4 generations, right? So the gene also changes in the brain structure. And psychologically, for example, if children absorb trauma through learned behavior or dysregulation of emotions or emotional patterns, um, it also can be learned through family dysfunctions, right? So these things are learned from generational trauma. Whereas if I have a personal abusive job experience or a romantic experience or any other personal experience which shapes how my interaction is with experiences, that is personal trauma. So I think that is the difference between what generational trauma and personal trauma is. Mhm.
We would also like to hear from Yeaija, ma'am.
Yes. So, firstly, thank you so much, Deso. Your introduction was really lovely. And I think both Ritika and Sonakshi have well put it out, like what is generational trauma and like how it's different from personal trauma. But I think yes, what we go through on a regular basis, and I know like the meaning of trauma is very subjective. What is trauma to me may not be trauma to you, right? But the way how our internal self reflects on those behavior and those experience actually leaves a huge impact on our mindset, on our our the way we see, the way we are going to experience the same thing again in the future, because there is a core memory or there is a strong belief that has been already been set due to the experience that you just had, or you had few months later, or few months earlier, something like that. All right. So when we talk about generational trauma, it can go from, you cannot like tell like ये generation से ये आया है, वो generation से वो आया है, but it's more of like a combination of generation to generation, and it can go from very very to our ancestors, बहुत बहुत पहले, right? So I think one thing that is common for generational trauma is that when things are set unresolved, right? When there are things where it's not resolved properly, when things are not, when the needs and everything are not met properly, and when you do not resolve your experience per se, or negative experience per se, and it's there lingering in you, and then it manifested genetically to different ways to your next generation. And like Ridhika said, generational trauma is, the personal trauma is directly affecting you. Generational trauma is affecting, one after another, एक generation से next generation तक. So I think that's how we would like, I would like to say the difference between generational trauma and like personal trauma.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Yeja ma'am. Thank you, Sonakshi ma'am. That was really insightful explanation. It's fascinating to hear how generational trauma can span across multiple generations, often influencing individuals unknowingly. My next question is for Sonakshi ma'am. You have mentioned quite about like passing down the trauma through families, both biologically and psychologically. Could you please tell us how one can cope with it, or how one can start seeking help about it?
Right. So I think the first part, which comes from healing from any kind of traumatic event, would be recognizing and acknowledging its existence as a whole. So I think the first step to healing is accepting, acknowledging that some traumatic event has happened to us, and the awareness allows an individual to see how past wounds have influenced their behavior, relationship, and then now beliefs towards how they feel about things or look at it, right? So, the second step could be if an individual is then comfortable with seeking therapy or counseling, and which can provide a space where they can share about the experience they had, which is a safe space where they know that a trained professional can help them navigate, or a space where they feel comfortable enough to just acknowledge that something happened to them and share in regards to that. Okay, and I think the last thing which will overall help someone is self compassion, right? To give themselves the love and acceptance that if something has happened to us, we should give ourselves that space to feel that it's not okay, right? To feel that it will take time when healing happens. And even if it's personal healing or therapeutic healing, healing in general just takes time, right? So I think the last thing would be to give yourself that time and space to heal as an individual, and to be a little patient and compassionate towards your own self. So I think this is how someone can be soft and kind to their own self, and that's probably the better way to go about it than I think any specific pattern to help yourself, through a traumatic event. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the beautiful answer. You put it so beautifully. Um, I'm sure many of our audience are reflecting on their own family dynamics after hearing that. My next question is for Yeja, ma'am. You mentioned so beautifully in the beginning about generational trauma, and how it is different from the various other traumas. So, what are some common signs that someone may be experiencing the effects of generational trauma?
Right. So I think like both of our speakers have actually said it very well, how what is trauma and like how is generational trauma happened, right? So once we understood that generational trauma exists, like Sunakshi said, to anything to actually be, to start working on something, the first thing you need to see is to accept, to have the insight that yes, there is presence. So the next thing is the signs and symptoms, which I am going to speak about. So when we talk about generational trauma, these trauma, we need to know that they can manifest into three major things. First is your emotional patterns, and so psychological, they can give you some psychological signs. Second is your behavioral patterns, right? And third is your physical symptoms. All right. So when we talk about emotionally, what we are trying, what are the signs that we can see is, one thing for sure is hypervigilance. You are always on the edge. You always have this feeling of scanning for danger. You're always anticipating for something that can go wrong or something that can happen to you, right? You're very hyper vigilant about things in day to day event. And we know that psychologically, hypervigilance is also a big trait when it comes to anxiety disorder, when it comes to GAD, right? So the another sign linked with hypervigilance is that the person can go through unexplained anxiety and unexplained mood disturbance, right? It can be this persistent feeling of sadness, the persistent feeling of fear, or there is an uneasiness without any clear cause. Even if you take professional help and if you try to dissect what is the reason of these happening to you. But the patient would come to you, the client might come to you with a pattern showing that they do not have a very specific, or they do not have a very well explained, why is that particular happening to them. And when you look into the case properly, when you dissect the case properly, you'll see a pattern which is present in also in their parents, maybe the mother or the father, or maybe the similar pattern was available or was seen in the grandmother. Right? So emotionally, hypervigilance is something, unexplained anxiety, mood disturbance. Another thing where generational trauma takes place and can also be assigned is low self-esteem. Your self-esteem, the way you see how worthy you are, the feeling of unworthiness, or the carrying a guilt inside you that beyond one's control. You don't have the control on that guilt that you have. You don't have the control on your self-esteem. It's beyond something where you are feeling persistently that you're not good enough. I cannot do it. There's this constant, persistent feeling of, doubting yourself. Another thing that can also come under emotional and psychological sign is your emotional numbness. You know, Suppressing your emotion or struggling to connect with people and their feeling, or even your own feeling. And like I said before, if you dissect a little bit the case, if you dissect the genogram, if you see the family history and the genogram, you'll understand that even the parents are somewhere, they have emotional numbness somewhere. All right, maybe not to that intensity to which the client has, but yes, the family do have some predominance on these particular genes where they are emotionally numb. Right. So moving ahead, that was the emotional and the psychological sign. Now, what can be the behavioral patterns? Right. One of the behavioral pattern is actually the unhealthy relationship cycles that we have. The one that we keep on attracting, right? Your attachment style, your attracting style depends a lot on your generational wounds that you had or that you have. Attracting or staying in unhealthy relation dynamics or unhealthy relationship due to ingrained family patterns. Basically, you have somewhere learned it in the pattern in your family, or maybe you have seen it somewhere in your family, and you have continued this particular thing, this particular pattern. And one might can ask oneself, like, how do I know, how do I recognize, like, if I have an unhealthy relationship cycle or something like that. One of the simple, this is something that I always tell even my clients, one of the simple question that you can ask is, are you always in the same loop? you know are you always in the same chain when you are in a relationship, no matter which relationship you are in, no matter which partner it is? But do you see your relationship always go through a similar pattern, or do you see your partners somewhere have similarities? That is how you know that you are attracting a certain kind, and you are attracted to a certain pattern of behavior. And then another behavioral pattern can be, as parent can be overprotective parenting. Right now, when we say about overprotective parenting, we basically mean that projecting our inherited fears onto our child. Overprotective. Your parents are overprotective. To your parents have some inherited fears in them from that which came from their parents, and now the same fear they build in you because they are fearful of that particular thing. Right? So that, and from that fear, to protect their child from fear, parents often turned into overprotective parenting. They fall into this particular thing, and that is something, again, has different cause to how the child is, again, understanding it, putting their own perspective about how my parents are treating me, or how my parents are putting the rules and regulation and how they see me. right? Another, again, very much well seen behavioral pattern is your addictive and your coping mechanism. It's very well seen. It is somewhere, a lot of studies have also been done on this particular thing, on generational trauma, and how your coping mechanism works, and how your addictive behavior also relies on. So when I talk about addiction, or when I talk about coping mechanism, it can be as simple as using substance, food, your fear of escaping from a situation, conflict fear. All of these things can also be ingrained in you because of your generational predisposition in the particular gene, in that particular thing, right? And lastly, the health signs that you can see. Firstly, one of the signs that you can look out for is the chronic stress or fatigue, and it also comes with unexplained. To be honest, you are getting adequate amount of food, sleep, your appetite is fine, you're trying your well to work out, have a physical good routine as well, but at the same time there is this chronic stress in you, and there is this fatigue in you, right, which is not going away with no amount of sleep, no amount of proper diet, no amount of anything, right? And that can also be a sign that you can look for. And then I think, yeah, these all together basically gives you an understanding what can be signs that you can look for yourself or for someone you care, and this can actually have an underlying cause of generational trauma.
Thank you so much, Yeaija ma'am. This was really thoughtful and really insightful. Like how you mentioned about the attachment styles, about GAD and hypervigilance. Also, like you mentioned about the coping strategies. So it's important, like you mentioned, to recognize the signs of generational trauma and what you have shared about the emotional, psychological, and behavioral patterns. It really helps clarify how deeply ingrained these cycles could be. So, coming back to Ridhika ma'am. So, this question is about culture, societal norms, family dynamics. So, in what ways do culture, societal norms, and family dynamics reinforce the trauma patterns?
So, as Yeaija addressed a few things, I would like to repeat that. So, she something spoke about emotional numbness or how the parent becomes too protective. Then, the meaning of the word address here. So, I feel when we talk about cultural norms or say family dynamics and how it reinforces the trauma, two things are very important. First is the awareness, and second of all it's addressing. So how much we are aware of what is the fact that we are having this kind of patterns or someone is facing the generational trauma, and how purposely we are willing to take help. As Sonakshi also mentioned about that healing takes time, and of course it is a collaborative process and it's just not a one day thing. So yeah, I believe that cultures which like suppress the feelings or they value strength over expression, or say for example they are now they are having this gender or social contrast rules about gender discrimination, or say the family dynamics which are not very open about expressing this kind of things, they may have this unhealthy coping mechanisms like say substance abuse or say neglect. So they this way the personality of the person or the behavior of the person will be of course very obvious to see that they are functioning in this pattern. So of course the belief system which we say about the societal norms or the family dynamics patterns, how the parenting is going, or how their ancestors have been given the kind of coping healthy coping mechanisms or unhealthy coping mechanisms where they are staying in. So this of course play a role how the person will be addressing the trauma either in a healthy or in an unhealthy manner. So I believe that awareness and acceptance and addressing these three terminologies are very important when we are actually trying to break the generational trauma.
That was really beautifully put it, ma'am. Thank you for that. My next question is for Yeja, ma'am. How can parents and caregivers create a healthier emotional environment for children specifically?
Right. So, before we talk about like how can they, let's just focus on few things like what are the requisite they need, to have emotionally soothing or emotionally protected, healthier environment for the kid. So, first thing is safety. First and the primary thing that you need to look out to raise any kid, the safety. When I see safety, it should be physically safe, it should be emotionally safe for the kid, where the kid feels physically also safe and emotionally safe to talk, to run around, to move around. That is the first thing any parent need to look into their kid. Another thing that the parent need to look in it is the nurturing environment, to make an environment in such a way that the kid is nurtured from that environment, right? And when these two things are fulfilled, safety and nurture, when these two things are fulfilled, then their parent have already worked in the development of healthier emotional environment for the kid. Now, how can they? First and foremost, have an habit or start building habits or foster open and safe communication, in the home setting. So when the kids talk to their parents, when the parents talk to their kid, encourage expression of emotions. Let the kid know that all the thoughts that they're sharing, every the feeling that they're sharing with the parents is judgment free. They don't have to fear of the judgment, what the parents are going to think about them, what the parents are going to speak about them, right? So when the kid has an environment where the parents itself encourages them, to express freely, it is without any fear, you are already fostering a safe and open communication environment. Secondly, apart from encouraging open expression, validate their emotion. It is very necessary. A lot of time parents, they just listen to their kids because they have to, because the kids won't stop talking. They'll have to listen, सुनना ही पड़ेगा क्योंकि ये तो बोलेगा ही, इनको तो सुनना पड़ेगा ही. But they don't validate their emotion a lot of time, because a lot of time adults think that kids emotion or children's emotions are not that something which is, not that important, or not that something like वो लोग इतना जल्दी बुरा नहीं मानेगा, things like that. It's not that important to understand a kid's emotion. But validating your child emotion is basically you're acknowledging them. They feel that they are respected through what they are being, what they're trying to express. Apart from fostering open communication and safe communication, uh, to have a model of healthy emotional regulation in the family, the parents need to be emotionally available. So the change starts from the parents itself first, and then to the kid. Show warmth, affection, support between the parents and to the kid, because a lot of time, and it's not like something which is very new, but we know, we have been seeing this from a very old age, that kids try to mirror their parents, right? They try to understand, and in psychology we call it as social learning, right? We learn from what we see. So in that case, if you are emotionally available, if you as a parent, if you are working on yourself and how you deal with your emotion, and it's the same way the kid is getting a scope to learn the same thing from you, right? Apart from that, I think setting a healthy boundary with discipline and compassion. Now, a lot of time when we say positive parenting, a lot of time people think that positive parenting basically means, listening to everything that your kid says, never saying no to your kid, you know all those, stubbornness, all those tantrums and whatever they throw, you always have to take it. You cannot say no to your parents, no to your kids ever. But that's not what is positive parenting. Positive parenting comes when you have a healthy set of boundaries, yet you have discipline. With discipline, you are compassionate with your kid as well, right? So it's three things: healthy boundary, with a proper discipline, and with compassion. When we say reinforcement in psychology, there are two types of reinforcement, right? It's basically positive or the negative reinforcement. So we can look into the positive reinforcement, right? So setting a healthy boundary with discipline and compassion. Now, why is compassion needed? Because compassion is something which will bring the kid to the right path without fearing their parents. you know Now, fear is also a very different, fear can be also of different intensity. There's a fear where kids hate their parents but never say anything wrong to their parents, just in a fear that they're going to be physically abused, right? Or they are going to be get they are going to get some sort of negative punishment, right? In that particular sense, that fear is very rigid to their parents, right? And that can be tackled down with compassion if the parents are compassionate enough to the kids. Another very important thing is establishing a clear and consistent rule. One of the core principles of your positive parenting: establish a clear and consistent rules, which is also applicable for the parents and also applicable for the kids, right? And they have to understand this particular dynamics, that if I want my kid to change, even I have to accept the fact that maybe I need some change, right? Adjusting with one another. So when I speak about establishing clear, consistent rule, it's going to be basically the rules have to be predictable. It has to be predictable for the kids, so that they know that before they do something, oh, I have a rule like this at home, I cannot do that. Oh, I have a rule like that. Mama told me this before, Dada told me this before, Dad told me this before. I can actually work like this. I actually can, do this or do that. Right. So when your rules are consistent in nature, they won't have the problem in understanding. Right. And then avoiding harsh punishment is something which is very, very important. Like, avoid harsh punishment, you know and I think a lot of that can be tackled with the simple mindset that we had. Amar time out itu hoisile, or like hamare zamane mein ye hua tha. Yes, it happened to you, but that doesn't mean that it has to still continue in this particular generation, right? It has to stop somewhere. Maybe you bring the change in your kids when you are parenting your kid, and maybe these kids are going to be the example where the parenting style actually changes in the future. Right. So it starts from these small things that we see on a regular basis. Like हमारे ज़माने में तो हुआ था, हमें तो इससे मार मिलती थी, उससे मार मिलती थी, ये होता था, वो होता था. We understand, but doesn't have to that just because you have gone through the same amount of pain, and just because you have gone through the same amount of a negative experience, doesn't mean your kid also have to go through the same pattern. Just so they are different. Right. Another thing is that apart from these, I think prioritizing, having a open conversation. I will go back to the first point again. Having a open and prioritizing the mental well-being and the mental health of the kid, and not just of the kid. The parents also are very vocal and are also very in conversation with their partners as well. Understanding all of the things that they're going through, teaching young kids how to cope in a positive way, right? So as simple as breathing technique, coping can be as simple, can be as breathing technique. You're angry, you wanna throw things, you wanna throw tantrums. Yes, kids do that, but maybe tell them or acknowledge them in a positive way. Tell them that why is it happening and how can they, what can they do instead, without slapping them or without, putting another level of aggression on them, right? Apart from that, like I said, it has the cycle has to be like break somewhere. Kahin pe to todna padega. So the only thing that apart from these particular things that I just said, to build an emotionally healthier environment for the kid, I think parents need to understand that whatever happened to you happened. It doesn't mean that the same pattern has to be happening to your kid, right? I recently saw an interview where I heard that, kids always, like, parents always have this thing: what do you want for your kid? Oh, I want my kid to be better than me. I want my kid to be different than me. I want my kid to reach more heights that I did not reach. But then at the same time, you want your kid to follow the exact same pattern that you had in your childhood. So if your child follows the exact same pattern that you had while growing up, how do you think your child is going to experience something different? He or she is going to be exactly like you, because you never allowed your child to experience anything different from what you experienced in the past, right? So the acceptance and the awareness of the fact that yes, हम लोग के ज़माने में ये हुआ था, अभी नहीं होना चाहिए, or let me try, let me bring the change in the parenting style. And that itself is somewhere acknowledging the fact is itself almost like breaking that cycle of generational trauma. So I think yes, so that's all from my end.
Thank you so much. That was really, really, really insightful. How you mentioned about validating a child and how like small steps like listening can just help. And parents to set boundaries and the coping strategies which you mentioned. And like you mentioned, like creating a space and nurturing emotional environment for children is so much vital. And I love like how your focus on emotional intelligence and empathy. I think that all of our viewers right now who are parents and caregivers themselves are able to resonate with it, right? So I would also like to ask this question to Ritika ma'am. Like you work closely with children, you are academic counselor, and you have spent so much time with the children, and of course with the parents. Would you like to answer this question? How can parents and caregivers create a healthier emotional environment for children?
Yeah. So first of all, like Yeja mentioned, listening and creating a safe environment for them. See, nurturing really plays a very important role. If the child is not feeling safe or he or she is fearful about just saying a minor thing to the parent, I guess the child will never heal, or he or she may never feel comfortable sharing his or her experiences. And secondly, of course, validating feelings is important, and taking help, asking for help, or see, like, creating a space where the parent can also learn the people who are actually living, like suppose for example they are living in an extended family, so if the traumatic events are coming from that side also, so when we say, we create a healthy boundaries, so the person is, if they are indulged in this kind of thing, if they are having awareness about where I need to break the chain or the cycle, that's where they can help the child or their child to be shaped in a better way, or their future in a better way. And yeah, and thirdly, I would say that it's like a very sad thing that even still we hear this kind of phrases, no, like this are nothing, मत सोचो, ये सब दिमाग में है, या फिर ये सब कुछ नहीं होता, मार मिलने से ही चीजें ठीक होते हैं, हमारे टाइम में मिला था. Of course, this is very common statement that we hear still. हमारे टाइम में ये होता था, ये होता था. Of course, growth will never happen because change is the only constant. We have to bring the change to give them a changed environment, or if we want to see the growth and development in their behavior, because every time the lifestyle, the patterns that we are brought up is never the same. It's gradually changing, and of course we need to change our emotional and mental health well-being also. So yeah, that's all from my end.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you very much. We have a question over the chat box we're receiving currently. Even our viewers can put up comments with their questions. So I'd like to ask this question first to Sonakshi ma'am, as we can see on the screen. Shika Kalita mentioned that as young adults, can we help our mothers and grandmothers heal from their own generational trauma?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because this is something I personally also try to think about. See, I think mothers, like, and because I was in a sort of joint setup while I was growing up, we see how not just generational trauma, but how a lot of things societally they accept as a part of their life. They might not want it for us or want to continue it in some ways, but as we see it growing up, we also in some ways inculcate it, right? So I think one thing would be to maybe try to give them that space to be who they want to be, and also let them prioritize themselves in some ways. Like some small things could be, I now try to tell my mom to go out on her own or do activities that she likes to do, which is personal to her, hobbies that she likes to do, or things which make more meaning to her, not just as a family but personally, right? So I think as people who are nurturers, as you know, women are seen as most as people who nurture or take care of the family. So for most part, I think that's a role they take in, and just to know that they can prioritize themselves and also do things that they want to do is how we can help them heal from their own maybe acceptance, and in a way to accept as they've grown with time also, right? So I think I don't think as adults we can really be therapists to them because that's a professional space. But I think as children, we can just try to provide that space to them where they can be more freely themselves, and also accept them for the way they are, you know. So the defenses that we have, I think acceptance also in some way heals them in their own way. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you so much for
Mhm.
that. We'll go back to Ritika ma'am. As young adults, can we help our mothers and grandmothers heal from their own generational trauma?
Ritika, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So yeah,
Yeah.
as Sonakshi mentioned, no, we cannot be a therapist to them. So their healing journey will take up under the professional dynamics only. But yes, being a young adult, if we can see the like patterns of generational trauma in them, of course we can provide them with the space, or we can try to make them aware about the facts, like what healthy boundaries mean, or what taking help actually creates, or help them how to channelize their own boundaries to perform in the family setting. Or of course the belief system, how they can break the belief system or the patterns that is ongoing, and how we can actually get them into our insight and have a healthy coping mechanism towards it. Yeah.
Thank you for the answer. Yeja ma'am, would you like to take this answer?
Yes, this so. I think Sonakshi and Ritika already mentioned it well. Like they have actually touched all the points. The only thing I would like to add is that as young adults, so Shikha asked us as young adult, right? So I think as young adults, we can start from acknowledging their pain, not being their therapist, not being anything like that. Those are completely on the different this thing on the professional side, but acknowledging their pain, you know, and to validate and to understand that yes, they have gone through struggle, they have actually had hard time dealing with a lot of things. Sometimes as simple as just listening to your parents when they speak, you know, when they are, you know, talking to you, or when they are, you know, sharing their hard times with you or something like that, validating it, listening to it, and encouraging open communication, you know, going through a, like having an open space to our moms or to our dads, for them to actually come to us and to speak. I know dads are not someone who would actually do that quite often, but I think there are some fathers who actually speaks to their kids and they actually open up. And men do have a little hard time to actually speak about their struggles and all of these things and hard times. But I think women, as mothers they do talk, and they do like to share about these things a lot. So maybe encouraging an open communication, and then acknowledging their pain and the struggle that they have gone through, is definitely going to, you know, foster this sense of like, yes, hua tha. And then I think at the end, and together summing it up to a point where you actually know that, you know, that happened in the past, but change is possible. right now. If they want, they can change. I know they feel that bahut kuch ho gaya, they're old now, nothing can change. But as Sonakshi said, simply as prioritizing themselves, doing something for their own self care, or doing something for their own interest per se. Because as we see, like, with time our parents, with time our, the our parents, they lose their interest, their hobby, the things they used to love to do, previously. Interest chala jata hai un logo ka bahut time pe. So maybe, telling them, having a conversation where they can actually talk, you know and foster a good connection, and that will definitely help you to foster good connection with your even parents.
Thank you so much for that. Like we say, sharing is caring and listening makes things better. Creating safe space is really essential. We have few more questions on the chat box. Praveen Prakash put it a question for us here. Can we discuss some examples of generational trauma seen in different cultures or communities? I think the term culture and community is coming quite today. So would you like to take that, Sonakshi ma'am?
Right. So, see, I do not want to specify any specific culture to say that this is how generational trauma probably is how, this happens in this culture or community. I feel like as an Indian society, because we are more um, holistically oriented and not individualistic, sometimes it becomes as a part of our structure to prioritize the community more than us personally, is what I would like to say. So maybe taking from that, common example would be maybe how sometimes we are taught that we should think about others before we think about ourselves, and how we should keep others' needs before us, right? While we're growing up, we are told to keep our needs second. I think there is like a small line between respecting someone else and also making that boundary come across as what you require and need. And perhaps just figuring that balance out, that this is, something which is my need, is which I require, or this is something which is little unacceptable to me as an individual or a grown adult person. So perhaps maybe making that boundary is important. And I think, yeah, that is what I would like to say, that because of the kind of society we come in, we also get a lot of community care, but sometimes it becomes as a part of our structure to not prioritize our needs so much. So maybe keeping that in mind could be very helpful. Hmm.
Thank you so much. Ridhika ma'am, would you like to answer that question on cultures and communities? Yes.
Yes, so some common examples that we see in generational trauma in different cultures and communities, like say for example, if a person's suppose for them the child parents are somewhere just having this relationship bond where just they need to fulfill their duties, raising the child or something like that. So they have always faced this missing of emotional availability in them. So now you will see the child who is actually forming a relationship outside the family. He may also develop this kind of thing. So because he is not aware of the fact that how emotional availability means or what does it means in a relationship, he may just think that performing his duty or just say wishing on special occasions will do the thing in the relationship, because of the fact he has never seen or experienced this, or may suppose there was no open communication about this fact that what emotional availability actually means. He or she may also develop this kind of relationship outside the family structure again. So now see, this can be taken as a example where the generational trauma, where the like mother or the father did not had this kind of emotional bond between them, but they were just aligned in the marriage to fulfill their own duties. Now if their cultural beliefs taught them that, now the child is also having the similar patterns when he or she is forming the relationship outside. So yeah, this I think will do a justification to the example which we can show that how generational trauma can be seen in different culture and communities.
Right. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
ma'am.
before we move forward, I'll just take a leave because it's 4. I have some prior commitments.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Desu, so much, and
Thank
also
you
the
so much, ma'am, for
co-teachers
joining us
and
today.
yeah, PsychSpace for giving us such a wonderful platform. I would really like to join in again for in future for such meaningful and insightful communication. Yeah. So thank you. Bye bye. And yeah,
Thank you
wishing
so
you
much.
all again a very happy International Women's Day.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ritika, for
you. Thank you
joining
so
us.
much.
Bye bye. Take care.
So, moving ahead, there's another question by Nicole. Yeaija, ma'am, I'd like to ask you that question. Some individuals tend to completely cut off from their families, especially in severe trauma cases. Would this be seen as an escape or being courageous, doing what's right for oneself? It's a good one. It's a good question.
Yeah, I
By
said it's a
Nicole.
good one. I
Oh, yes,
can
yes.
see the question. Can I just see the question? Just give me a minute.
Sure, sure.
What was the name
Nicole.
of the
Nicole.
individual who asked?
By
Nick.
Nicole.
Oh, okay. All right. Just
Mhm.
give me a minute.
Yes, we can see it on the screen right now.
Can see on the screen, no? Now?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
All right. So some individuals tend to completely cut off from their families, and especially. Okay, Nicole. So one needs to understand what is trauma, right? When you know that something is, something which is very hard for you to accept, very hard for you to move on from that particular incident, right? And then for that particular thing, you are being, you are basically asking, do you think it is courageous to escape from a situation and stuff like that? One needs to know that putting it more on the courageous side or a coward side, I would like to tell you that it's your coping mechanism, how you are dealing with that particular thing, right? As a psychologist, I wouldn't tell you is it a coward behavior or is it a courageous behavior for you, to escape from that particular thing. But I would tell you maybe that is a kind of coping mechanism that you have, a coping skill that you have, that whenever there's a conflict, whenever there's some hard situation or times like that, you try to move away, you try to disconnect yourself, you try to avoid communication, during that particular period, maybe because you don't want any other, individuals understanding or comment or criticism or any sort of, any sort of noise. Basically, you just want to be with yourself and you want to cut off from the people, right? So that can be something that I am seeing it, I see it as a way of coping mechanism or a coping skill, rather than putting into the this thing on courageous or not.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. We have another question by Minakshi. It's how does generational trauma specifically impact women in terms of societal expectations, emotional well-being, and family dynamics? As we're talking about International Women's Day today, it's a really beautiful question. Sonakshi, ma'am, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I can see it on the screen now.
Yes.
Right. See, I feel like as women, we play multiple roles while we are, a part of the society. You can, while growing up, be a daughter or a sister to someone, and later be a partner, professionally, therapist, multiple roles, right? So, as people who are part of societal just expectations, I think, happen to people both ways. I would say that it's also, there are certain expectations and roles that men are supposed to provide, and there are certain expectations that women have. But specifically coming to how generation trauma can impact women would be how we learn certain things from maybe our mothers, or like someone said, grandmothers, things like that. So when we see, I think one quote I read some time back was also that I have seen like really ambitious women, I've seen achieving women, right? But I haven't seen a woman who's super calm about where she exists. So I think that is a very enriching thought which stayed with me for a really long time, because while growing up we see working women, right? Now we see people who want to achieve, but very less do we see women who are very um, at ease with enjoying uh, calmness or the privilege to maybe just sit and enjoy a cup of coffee, right? So, do you feel guilty for taking that time out for yourself? Do you feel guilty for taking that space for yourself? Do you feel guilty for asking for what you need, right? So, I think these are how things generationally like are things we pick up, from the societal expectations also, because I have actually seen very less women be fully accepting to taking vacations, space, and just making that time for themselves. Okay. So I think that is how it obviously impacts the individual, the woman. And also, of course, if someone is not very happy or cannot prioritize their needs, it at the end also comes down to the family dynamics and their own obviously personal well-being, right? So this is how I would say that generational trauma has or can impact women. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There's one more question. Um, I would like Yeja ma'am to answer that. It's by Neha. How does societal pressure impact women's mental health?
Right. Neha, thank you so much for your question. I think like I don't know where to start from this particular question because it is so relevant and it has so much of context to speak on. So let's just say societal pressure. Okay, what are societal pressure? कि इन लुक्स बेसिकली इन अपीयरेंस तुमको ऐसा दिखना है, तुमको ये करना है, वो करना है, टॉक लाइक अ गर्ल, सिट लाइक अ गर्ल, बी लाइक अ गर्ल, डू लाइक दैट लाइक अ गर्ल, all of these things. So with age, your societal pressures are different, right? So let's just say when you are in the teenage, right? Adolescent or pre-adolescent stage mein, then from that very time they started speaking about how you're looking, right? Oh, इतना जल्दी बड़ा हो गया, ये हो गया, वो हो गया, you have put on weight, you have done that, you have done this, all of those things, right? And then it has come to some point, just give me a minute. So it has come to a point that with age, your expectations in the society just gradually keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing, right? To an extent where you question your own self. What do I want? Because I'm not being able to fulfill those societal expectation. Neither I'm looking like that, nor I am doing work like that, nor I am being to fulfill about, because a lot of time the societal pressure that you have on yourself, the societal expectation that you have on yourself actually set your core beliefs about yourself, and you think that you need to be in that particular way, because then only society is going to accept you, then only society means people are going to accept you. And as human beings, we are social beings, right? We want to be accepted, we want to other people, we want us to be connected with other people, right? So in that particular loop, we always are in this constant run that we need to look, talk, dress, work in a certain way. Right. I'll just give you a small example. These days, abhi, people who are makeup artists, people who are tattoo artists, people who are doing any sort of creative job are given a lot of recognition and given a lot of respect, right? But before, just imagine this thing that you as a woman, you wanted to be a makeup artist. Firstly, the question would be, I don't see a scope in this particular field. But we know beauty industry now. We know makeup industry now. It's blooming, right? It's booming a lot, and there are so much of opportunities there, right? So when we talk about your generational trauma, when we talk about the way women are expected to behave in a certain way, it actually, it for sure it's going to impact your mental health. And it will come as, like, let's just say, body image issue, as simple as that. A lot research and like study shows that women go through body image issues so much more than compared to men, right? And that completely comes from a factor that women are expected to work or to look, to be a certain kind, a certain type, right? So I just give you a small example of body image issue, but with body image issue, there can be comorbidity with anxiety, with OCD, with all other different, mental health concern, right? So yes, societal pressure definitely has an impact on mental health for sure. And I'm not saying this only for women, men as well, it does. Because for men also, just because it's International Women's Day, I just don't want to keep on talking about one specific sex. I really want to talk about men as well. But because for men also, they have certain societal expectation. No matter, for us it's our beauty, how we look, right? For men it's their income, what they work, what job do they seek, what is the income do they have. Irrespective of how the guy looks, they always look for the financial status of the guy. And that puts a lot of pressure on men as well, and their mental health as well. So guys, men who have less, who are socioeconomically a bit behind, and who are not earning to that, to the societal expectation of how men should earn, always go through a lot of self-esteem issue. They don't approach women who are in high status, they don't, because in their head, they know that society wise this can never happen, right? Because they are not good enough, they are not rich enough, right? So Neha, no, like, you can put anything, you can ask, you can take a small example to smallest example. You can see that if there is a pressure from the society to be in this particular way or to work in this particular field, I think definitely it is going to impact you. And especially when you do not fit in those gender norms or in those expectations from the society, right? So yeah, that's all.
It's really beautiful. Like, you really answered that so beautifully. Like, you spoke about body image issues. Like, it's a very sensitive matter. People have started talking about this, and as you are so vocal about it, you beautifully put it that. Also, I really like one fact which you mentioned, that it is so much comorbid. We are not just looking it from one lens, but there are so many multiple lenses to look to this issue, to this um, generational trauma which we are talking about right now. So before we move on to like the chat questions, I have one question left for Sonakshi ma'am. So this question is about healing, like you mentioned previously about healing. So how individuals and their caregivers, like family members, partners, or relationship partners, how can they recognize generational trauma, and what type of steps they can take towards healing?
Okay, so I think as family members or partners in general, the first thing that you could do is maybe let the other person. I think it's, see, I don't think anyone is receptive if you go and tell someone, hey, this is a trauma I feel like you have, or this is something that you're suffering from. So no one really wants to hear it from another person's mouth until unless they experience it themselves and they wish to talk about it or share, right? So I think the first thing would be to give them that space to acknowledge it on their own and then be there in the journey of healing that is to come eventually. See, I also don't feel like generational trauma or any kind of trauma, a person, any partner or family member does not, cannot 100% help heal them. They can just provide a space where the other person can be on their healing journey, right? So see, that's the difference between going to a therapist or having a family member or a partner be there, right? But of course, those are very important relations in any person's life, and having just any person who knows that they have that sort of support system and space, I think is the most important thing. Yeah. So I would just say that having, just knowing that you have that space and someone who's there for you, I think is the most important thing for anyone. Mhm.
Right. Thank you so much for that. These are quite some practical steps, like listening to someone, being there for someone, and being supportive towards the person who's suffering through issues. Um, and like you said, like it's about self-acceptance as well, like about self-awareness we are talking about here. So, so I'm pretty sure that everyone here today can take a piece of the advice which they can surely apply for tomorrow. So we'll be taking one last question. We'll be taking this question: how does generational trauma manifest in families and communities? I would like to start from Yeaija ma'am and then Sonakshi ma'am, please.
Right. Thank you so much for this question. How does generational trauma manifest in families and communities? Right. So, when we talk about generational trauma, you have to understand that there is a repeated emotional pattern that is happening. Some behavior, like I said in the beginning, am I audible? I think my network just glitched. Okay. Anyway,
You're
so
audible.
yes, all right. Thank you, Deso. So, generation trauma manifests in families through, like I said in the beginning, the signs and symptoms. It can, it can manifest into behavioral pattern. It can manifest into your emotional or psychological this thing, and physically also, right, like I said in the beginning. Now when we talk about families per se, you will see a certain this thing, there is an emotional suppression and avoidance, to talk about certain things, like they don't talk about it. They, families with a history with trauma, they avoid to discussing a difficult conversation. They don't want to speak about their past experiences and what they have gone through, right? So this can be one of the thing that where there is emotional suppression, emotionally. And apart from that, like I said in the beginning also, you tend to grow up, or your family would have certain signs of hypervigilance where you're always anticipating of the worst. You are anticipating of something wrong would happen, or you have a fear which is unreasonable. There's a fear, कुछ खराब हो जाएगा, कुछ गलत हो जाएगा, क्या ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा, something like that. And then you can see there's a dysfunctional relationship pattern. It can be between your parents, it can be you and your partner, or it can be between you and your siblings also. There are like dysfunctional relationship pattern basically, right? And maybe your sibling and their partner as well, right? So you can see there's like some sort of dysfunctioning in the family, and how they seek relationship patterns, and how they, sorry, not patterns, how they seek relationship. Like I said in the beginning, the attachment, right? How do you attach with your partner? So yeah, that can be a few things. And then I think something that we always like forget, like parents who have this image, or who have their own share of trauma or baggage, emotional baggage, they try to let that out in front of their kids from a very young age, right? And kids, as they are naive and they are innocent, they would never want their parents to be sad, right? So what do, they listen, right? In psychology, I think we call this parentified child, right? Where the child is actually working as a parent to their parent, so they are acting as an adult even before their age. They are listening to their parents, they are trying to be a problem solver in the parents conflicts, right? So kids who have the roles reversed in their life from a very young age, where they are, where they act as an adult, where they have to act or like speak like an adult, listen like an adult, because their parents are going through something traumatic and they have their emotional baggage, and the parents obviously shares it with the kid, and the kid now is in a dilemma that how do I rescue mommy, or how do I help my dad, because no kid want to see their mom and dad sad, right? So in that particular process, what the adult fail to understand is that the kid is growing way beyond to the age or to the mental age the kid should have at this particular point, right? The kid is parentifying himself. He's acting as a parent to his own parent, and that in the future would again, when the kid turn into an adult, will bring up a whole set of new complications, a whole set of new challenges in the kid when the kid is adult, right? So I think that's all from my end. I think I can't read your name, NCXWR. I hope my answer helped you, and yeah, thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you so much for that, ma'am. Like, this is actually really, really true. Like the way you mentioned about dysfunctional relationship patterns and how we are able to see the anticipation and manifestation with it, like within the families. It's really true. Um, Sonakshi, ma'am, would you like to answer the same question? How does generational trauma manifest in families and communities?
Yeah, so firstly, I think Yeaija explained it really beautifully, and she touched on a really important concept of parentification also. I think just adding on to it a little bit would be how parenting styles also influence how we perceive other relationships and how we come into contact with the other dynamics that we form personally, professionally, romantically as well, right? And coming to how our attachment styles are found, how we view the world, right? So all of it is really learned from how we pick up from our parents and the dynamic that we see. Also, when we biologically talk about it, the psychological issues maybe if our parents have, which could be anxiety or depression or any other things, not just clinically, but even small anxieties that we pick up, right? Because as children, I think the component of fear or anxiety also comes from what we view the world as, right? How we are taught that this is something that can hurt you, like this is something how it can harm you. So I think we learn all that from how our parents are, right? And fears also are passed intergenerationally, right? So I think those are certain factors which affect an individual in the way they are and also contribute to the way we view the world and the anxieties we hold also for the rest of our lives. So yeah, I think this is what I would want to say. I think the questions I think were really interesting. Some of them were very great to talk about. I think very less is it that we have such an interactive community where they pay so much attention throughout the session also, and at the same time the questions are very insightful. I think it also feels like the community, there are a lot of people who are from the psychology community, because I think it's very technical questions that people have asked, which is very interesting. So I really love that. Thank you so much to everyone who like was here, who took out time to also hear us out and also give us a chance to answer those questions. So yeah. Mhm.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that. So, as we approach the end of today's important webinar, let's take a moment to reflect on the valuable insights we have gained. We have explored how generational trauma affects women, the cycle that are passed down through families, communities, and how about the impact of culture as well, and the significant impact we can see about the patterns which are coming across generations. So our speakers beautifully have shed light on the immense resilience and the strength that women carry, even in the face of adversity. We have also discussed practical ways to begin healing and breaking the chains of generational trauma, the coping strategies, understanding the patterns, recognizing the patterns, and all, whether through therapy, community support, or personal growth, or personal support through our caregivers. Healing is a journey and it's one we can take together. So a heartfelt thank you to our incredible speakers, Yeaija ma'am, Sonakshi ma'am, and Ritika ma'am, for sharing their knowledge and wisdom with us today. Before we close, I would like to extend a special thanks to our viewers for the lovely questions, for being so interactive and so attentive for this special occasion. We at PsychSpace are available across all social media platforms. Please follow us on Instagram for the latest updates and professional support such as counseling and psychotherapy, behavioral mapping and assessment. Remember, we are just a DM away if you need any assistance. Happy International Women's Day once again. And thank you once again to everyone for being a part of today's webinar. We hope it left you with valuable insights to help you on your personal journey of healing and empowerment. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Deso. I would really like to thank you for moderating it so well. Thank you so much. And to
Thank you.
all our viewers, thank you so much for all the questions. I think some of the questions were so tricky. Even I had to take a moment and I had to think. So I was really happy. I think Sonakshi said it right. I think some of the viewers from here, I think most of them are actually very much attuned with psychology and they know what they need to ask. They know. And I was so happy for all the questions. Like, I hope I did justice to your answer. But for any professional help, if you need any, guidance or any sort of professional help per se, please feel free to reach us. Please feel free to reach PsychSpace, DM them, and we are just DM away. So yeah, that's all. Happy International Women's Day, guys. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.